Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Voice for Freedom podcast, where we celebrate freedom. We're all about freedom, and we understand that freedom isn't free. I'm here today with my amazing brother, Calev Myers, founder and chairman of Arise, and of course, my beautiful wife, Simone, and myself, Simeon, or Shimon, as some people know me. Calev, how are you today?
Doing quite well, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Hey.
Doing all right. There are some interesting movements, I would say, across the Middle East. There seem to be some shifts taking place over there that are actually hopeful, while simultaneously there's a massive opposition to that in the Western world. This Turning Point conference that just took place. Pretty interesting. You've got Charlie Kirk, who is historically very pro-Israel and, of course, references the Bible as his backdrop for that. And then he also platformed Tucker Carlson and hosted and moderated a debate between Dave Smith and Josh Hammer. The first thing that I want to talk about, Calev, and I'm curious your opinion on it, and there's some level of disagreement amongst people in our camp that are Zionist and pro-Israel. The first one is, should organizations like Turning Point and people like Charlie Kirk be platforming people like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith? And I'm going to ask you that question. I'm going to give my opinion on it in just a minute, but I'm curious your thoughts.
I think there needs to be a reckoning of the right wing in the United States with regards to anti-Semitism. And if there's not, that becomes a very, very slippery slope. And there's no question that the Candace Owens, the Dave Smiths, the Tucker Carlsons of the world have expressed some type of classic anti-Semitism. Now, Dave Smith is a Jew himself, but that doesn't really mean anything because there's a lot of self-loathing Jews in the world. And none of them would, and all of them are horrified when you pull out that term anti-Semitism and basically wave it off and say, oh, you just call everything anti-Semitism. And not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism and so on and so forth. But the obsessive focus on condemning Israel and questioning whether Israel has the right to exist it can come from nothing else. So if you're against nation states in general, like no people should have its own nation state, and therefore the Jews shouldn't have a right to exist, I think from an intellectual integrity perspective, that makes sense. And this might not actually be anti-Semitism. But if the Jews are the only people in the world that don't have the right to self-determination, and you have no problem with the Icelandic people or the Irish people or the Portuguese people that have their own nation with their right to self-determination, who can decide who comes in and doesn't come into their borders and to whom do they grant citizenship or not, and are we a Christian state or a Jewish state or a Muslim state, if that's okay with everyone else, but just Israel, this is a problem, then I think that's definitely anti-Semitism. And so this is growing and it's done in a very smart and subtle way. All the people we mentioned will interview, like you said, the commentators that question whether or not Hitler was really such a bad guy. And, but so I would say there's a strong anti-Semitic kind of movement creeping into the right of the United States. And I think it needs to be confronted. It can't be ignored. Is the best way to confront that actually giving them a stage or a part of a debate and so on and so forth? I'm not sure that's wise. I think what Charlie Kirk is trying to do, if I read the map, if I understand his intentions correctly, I think he's trying to hold together the MAGA camp. Right. So you have the Ted Cruz's on one side and you have the Tucker Carlsons on the other side. And you could see in their conversation that they were butting heads over the Israel issue. And so he's trying to create some kind of consensus. And at the end of that debate with Dave Smith and Josh Hammer, he tried to point out those issues that we can agree on. That all anti-Semitism is abhorrent. We can all agree on that. Like he tried to so I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to create or protect the unity within the MAGA camp. I'm not sure that's possible. I think there are lines that you cross when you just have to call the child by its name. Like you really have to call out the issue and address it. And if not, then the right wing of politics in the United States can really go the wrong direction. And it can snowball out of control.
Okay. So I'm going to give my opinion on it and answer my own question. I think yes and no. So, and first of all, I want to say Charlie Kirk is a friend of Israel. And, he did make it clear on many occasions and vehemently that this Jew hatred virus should not be tolerated. And He used some very strong language, and thank you for saying those things. And you and I criticize the Israeli government every day, and you and I also probably agree that anti-Semitism is overused.
Right.
That doesn't mean that some of these people aren't anti-Semitic. But should Charlie Kirk be platforming Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson? And I think the answer is yes and no, and it depends on how you do it. So here's my problem with it. I actually think healthy debate is crucial and one of the missing parts of society today. When we stop talking to each other and we just become so polarized that there's no longer any room for dialogue, then eventually I think that leads only one direction, which is violent conflict, unfortunately. Now,
it's also
I think there's
an important aspect of freedom of expression, freedom.
Absolutely. And it's healthy. It's healthy. I very much value opposing thought process, right? So you've got to listen to both sides of an argument to derive your standpoint. And so I think it's healthy to actually have that debate. And so in the case of Dave Smith and the debate with Josh Hammer, and I thought Charlie did an excellent job at moderating that. He didn't let it get too personal or too heated, and he reined it in multiple times, which is something, hey, Pierce, you should take a little course and a little lesson from Charlie on how to moderate some of these things. But of course, we know you have your own agenda. But in the case of Tucker Carlson, I think absolutely not. That's my opinion. If he would have had somebody debating Tucker Carlson, I would say absolutely. But to just give somebody a microphone and let them monologue and fill the heads of these well-meaning youth with absolute garbage and nonsense is a huge mistake, in my opinion, because it goes unchallenged, and that is dangerous. And Tucker has become very crafty in the way that he's presenting all of these different things. And so we're going to pick some of that apart here today.
Is he really, though? I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's very good at it, but people love it for some reason.
For people, well, because he plays on the emotions and the hardship of people. And in every lie, there's some truth. And that's what's so manipulative about it. Because, and I have these conversations with my own friends here in rural Pennsylvania, and we could talk about some of that. Hey, I just want to make a living. I'm working 3 jobs, and I don't know why we're sending money to Israel. I hear these people saying this. And so that's where it becomes crafty, because they are parroting things that they hear from people like Tucker Carlson, who is, hyper focused on one thing and one thing only. But Calev, you're about to say something.
I just want to address the substantial claim of Tucker Carlson. And the tricky thing is about people who bring up conspiracy theories or advanced conspiracy theories is that the thing that makes conspiracy theories last for so long is that they're very difficult to disprove, right? This could be this. I'm not sure if this is the case, but it could be. Like, it kind of makes sense that Epstein was Jewish, and and the Mossad is an amazing intelligence agency, and were they using him to gather,
it's
blackmail
plausible
information? It's plausible. Like, who can say if this happened or not happened? No. One thing I just have to say is this: that the Israeli Mossad does not do intelligence gathering operations on American soil at all, unless it is in cooperation with and approved by the CIA and the White House. America is Israel's most important ally, strategic diplomatic ally in the world, and Mossad would never jeopardize that relationship by doing under the table or any kind of intelligence work without the knowledge in the United States. But it's such a ridiculous theory. Like, people who really understand the way the Israeli government works, the way our diplomatic community works, the way our intelligence services work, understand that it's completely far-fetched and impossible that, Epstein was working for the Mossad, gathering that type of information on American soil. There have been cases that I'm aware of where the Mossad asked for permission to deal with a ticking bomb. What does that mean? That's let's say a Hezbollah sleeper cell that's in the United States that we're aware of. Mossad warns the United States, brings the information, and asks that if it can actively neutralize that threat. This happens, let's say, once a decade. Very, very rare that would happen. Just the process of getting permission to do something like that could take 2 years of bureaucracy to get through the CIA in the American administration. I'm talking about real cases that have actually happened in the past. So to think that Epstein was just working for the Mossad and, flying with Bill Clinton and Donald Trump and all these people, down to this island to gather information, there's no way in a million years. But the strength of those type of conspiracy theorists, again, is saying, well, how can you say that couldn't be? It's, it's plausible. How could it,
right.
And then they create, and it just perpetuates this absolute nonsense.
And this is where I want to point out that I do think there's a craftiness taking place here that's deliberate, extremely deliberate. And I want to just zoom out from the minutia of the different talking points, if you would, and just for those of you that are watching Tucker Carlson and what he says and his MO and some of the modus operandi of these other people that are scrutinizing Israel constantly, I want you to notice a few things. Their systems and patterns. One, he's going to play on the suffering of Americans, people that are struggling to make a living, so on and so forth. He's going to bring that up. He's going to point to corruption in government. He's going to bring that up. There's corrupt government on both sides of the aisle, and then deep state stuff, so on and so forth. By the way, there's truth in all those things. Absolutely. And then he's going to direct the conversation towards Israel. Notice this. This is the pattern. And that's where you've got to start to scratch your head and say what's going on here. And again, there's always some element of truth in it. And it gets as crafty as, let's talk about it. And Simone, we're going to play some of these clips and stuff. But where does it go from there? And this is where you've got to notice the subtleties. He takes somebody like Ted Cruz, an America First American, and just absolutely ambushes him and grills him and tries to make him look like a fool in front of his own base and in front of the entire country. He contradicts him and, challenges him on every single point. And then he interviews the president of Iran and just lets him say whatever he wants and doesn't challenge him at all, doesn't scrutinize him at all. He lets him make some outlandish statements. And then he further expounds on that and doubles down and stands up on a stage like Turning Point and makes these subtle statements. Oh, Iran is our biggest threat. Oh, they're not a threat to us. They can't, and he's planting seeds constantly. So what he's actually saying, without maybe saying the exact sentences, Iran isn't a threat to the United States, and we shouldn't be concerned about them at all. That's literally what he's saying. But we should be concerned about Israel, who shares the same value system that we share, collaborates deeply with us, and so on and so forth. And that's where I say it's crafty. And he does it by making these emotional cases.
If you have a neighbor whose son died from a drug overdose, that's probably because money was given to Israel under these defense guarantees, right? So the 0.1% of the American budget that's given to Israel, which, by the way, is paid to factories in the United States to create weapons based on Israeli technology. So the U.S. Gets jobs,
military
gets income,
vouchers.
gets
Look
technology.
it up, people.
But, right, exactly. But because America is doing that, we lost somebody to drugs over here, because otherwise that money definitely would have gone to prevent drugs. You know what I mean? Like, if you really think through it, yeah, it's perfect sense. Like, obviously.
So
like, how could this not be?
The nonsensical nature of this is what is lost on the American people today. And what he's playing on is this hunger for change. There is a legitimate hunger for change amongst the emerging generation, Gen Z, and even people of my generation, from Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. People are hungry for change. People want to challenge the system. People want to do this. But he's taking that positive desire and manipulating it and moving it towards a criticism and hatred for Israel. Let's just maybe, Simone, look at some of the things that were said, both by Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith in these different interviews. And let's sort of pick them apart a little bit, give our opinions on them.
Sure.
Totally deranged, but a good person said to me yesterday, Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Reading the talking point that apparently everyone, a bumper sticker that is for sale somewhere, I guess. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means exactly, but how many Americans have been killed by Shia terrorism in my lifetime, which is 56 years? I can't think of any. I'm sure there have been some in the United States. There have been Shia terror attacks sponsored by Iran in the U.S. I can't think of any. There was 9/11. That was a Sunni terror attack. And then there's the drug epidemic, which has killed more than 1 million people during that same period. People I know, my next door neighbor's kid, dead. People, a bunch of people I know have died, and a bunch have been totally screwed up and taken out of life, basically. Their lives have been hollowed out. They're husks. They've been totally destroyed by drugs. That's the reality that I live in the United States. So you're telling me Iran is a bigger threat than the people peddling this garbage? I don't think so. Not where I live, it's not. Oh, shut up. And the person literally said, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Disagree with what? What are you even talking about? But at least he gave me an answer. He didn't say, oh, you hate so-and-so. He didn't go immediately to motive. Okay, so this is always the tell. This is when you know you're dealing with someone who has zero interest in getting to the truth of the question and instead is trying to make you be quiet in order to roll over you and make you obey. And the tell is when they go immediately to motive. Well, you just hate some group, or you're taking money from some other group.
So tell me again that isn't some of the craftiest language imaginable. What is the correlation between these things? And it's.
Do you want to know the number of Americans killed by Shia terrorists in his lifetime?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Let's start. 1983, Beirut was bombed and 241 U.S. service members were killed, mostly Marines. Then there was the hostage crisis there in Lebanon, where several Americans were kidnapped, tortured, and killed by Hezbollah. And then there were the Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia. It was a Hezbollah group, also a Shia group linked to Iran, where 19 Air Force personnel were killed. And then there was the Iraq War, where the Pentagon has attributed several hundred U.S. troop deaths to the Iran-backed.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, to Iran-backed Shia militias. Anyway. Just a few.
How many Americans were killed by Hamas on October 7th? I think it's also several hundred. So if you put all those together, you might be around 1,000 or something like that. But let's say a group that's killed 1,000 Americans in Tucker Carlson's lifetime is also clearly attempting to create a nuclear weapon with an intercontinental ballistic warhead. And every day in their parliament chants death to America and death to Israel. Now, yeah, it's a very different problem than the people pushing drugs to your neighbors down the street. But I think it's a problem that it's completely rational to take seriously, right? And so, yeah, the whole thing is just it's
one
crazy.
Has to do with foreign policy and American global interest, and the other one is domestic problems on domestic soil
Not
here in the
related
United
at all.
States. But this is the crafty nature of it, because he's taking a real problem that we should all be absolutely concerned about, fentanyl flooding over our borders, right, here in the United States, that leads to, many, many people losing their lives and drug addiction and just horrible, horrible things. He's correlating that to American foreign policy, global American foreign policy, that every president in my lifetime has been committed to not allowing Iran to get a nuclear weapon because they are a threat. And here's one thing we can also point out about Iran. They're not very successful in trying to carry out what they chant every single day in their parliament: death to Israel and death to the United States. They're not great at it, but that doesn't mean that they don't intend to do it and that they don't put plans and systems in place to do it. They absolutely, inarguably, unequivocally do. And then where does he go from there? He plays on the emotions of drug addiction and drug-related deaths in the United States, correlates it to American foreign policy and real viable threats to America and American interests in the world. And then he brings it around to, without saying the actual word,
The hating the Jews and being funded by Qatar. Yeah,
literally.
So if you go right to motive, you say that I hated certain people and I'm being funded by somebody else. Well, yeah.
It's like when a used car salesman taps on the roof of a car and says, "I'm going to be honest with you." Is he? I'll tell you the truth right now. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not going to lie. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like let me address all of the objections in advance so that I can promote my perspective. And it is some of the craftiest speech imaginable. And this is what I don't think we should be giving a platform to, quite frankly, unless there's somebody that's there that can oppose what he's saying and point it out in real time, because it is extremely dangerous, as witnessed with what's happening across the United States and the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fact alone that Iran has like a dozen terror proxies across the Middle East is, I think, a big enough red flag for me personally. I don't know about the rest of the world, but just the fact that they fund these organizations who are all listed as foreign terrorist organizations across the world, that seems like a pretty big red flag.
And then
Iran completely funded Hamas, which carried out October 7th, which
Right.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, would be the equivalent of like 10 9/11s in the United States based on population size. So yeah, I think
One
it's
might
legitimate
ask a
to see that they're the biggest funder of terrorism in the world, and I don't even know what that means. I know what that means. That means giving hundreds of millions of dollars to jihadi, radical fundamentalist militias throughout the Middle East to kill innocent people. That's what that means.
And he tries to make
I
it
think
about
it's safe-
Shia versus Sunni, which is ridiculous too. Like, Iran is a majority Shia state, right? And there are, there's Hezbollah, the Houthis, and there's a bunch of like Syrian and Afghan and the Al-Ashtar, like there's Bahraini organizations under them. But there are also two really big Sunni proxies, and they are Hamas and the PIJ. So yeah, it's not just about that.
As somebody who listens to Tucker Carlson, unfortunately, somewhat regularly, just because I want to know what's going on out there, I think it's safe to say when he says he doesn't know what something means, he knows exactly what it means. Like he tried to say, I don't know what the word ally means. Like, I don't know what the word ally,
Right.
what does ally mean? And he uses it constantly,
Iran
I don't know what
sponsors
that
terror. I
means.
don't know what that means.
Right. And that's where I say that is very, very manipulative speech. Now, for people that sit there and get it, like it's not subtle, but to many well-intentioned youth that want to see real change in our country, it's a big problem. It's a really, really big problem. You can hear it in the applause of the crowd there.
He also said it, to Ted Cruz. He basically said, I don't even know what Israel means. What do you mean? I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Of course, that was a promise given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 regarding his descendants, like the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which are physical people. I don't know what that means. Is Israel Israel? Is it? I don't know. It's like, and you can say that about anything, and it just.
But he knows what everything else means. He's so sure of everything else.
Right.
But furthermore, then he goes on to allow the president of Iran to explain away on his show how chanting death to America doesn't mean literal death. How issuing fatwas and sending assassins
in the personal name
after
of
the president of the
Donald
United
Trump.
States. It doesn't really mean, they don't really mean what they say. He just lets that go unbridled and unchallenged on his show. It's unthinkable when he interviewed Ted Cruz and scrutinized him and scathed him and absolutely ambushed him. He said, if they actually were trying to kill the president of the United States, this is quote unquote Tucker's words, I think we should nuke Iran. We should nuke Tehran today.
Right.
This guy's deranged. I mean, honestly, like it's just crazy when they clearly are doing exactly those things, and we know it.
Do you think he is mentally unstable? I mean, so he attacks Ted Cruz, and then he gives this platform to the president of Iran. But what does that mean? Does that mean that he's actually more ideologically aligned with Iran than with Ted Cruz? Like, what does this mean? How do you?
So this goes to,
is it just clickbait?
Are we allowed to talk about motive? I don't know. I think that he preempted us being allowed to talk about his motives. I think that, Tucker, are we allowed to talk about your motives? Because I think I'm really confused about what your motives are. It seems like you don't know the difference between an enemy and a friend. Well, I don't know what friend means. I don't know what enemy means. Like, that would be his response.
I can't imagine
the motives
he has
of
many
these
friends,
guys.
so maybe he doesn't know what it means.
When it comes to Tucker Carlson, you can look it up really, really easily. And look, these are very, very difficult questions. He's been accused of taking Qatari money. We know that he received a $15 million grant from I think it's Omid Malik. He comes from Pakistani Iranian descent. That's how Tucker started his show. I do want to say, here's what we know. There are a lot of things we can't know, and I don't want to delve into that conspiracy theorist. We know that something's off here. We know that he is absolutely agendizing his platform against Israel and on behalf of Qatar and Iran. He does mention Qatar from that stage as well. They're great people. It's a great country. I've been there. It seem like great people. Okay, Tucker, why are you doing this? Have you been to Israel? Are they great people? Why aren't you saying that? We share the same value system. Israelis share the same value system as Americans. Don't hear a lot of talk about that. The reasons why are tricky. I will say this. Here's one thing we know. If you follow the trajectory of these voices, there's one thing that they basically all have in common, which is a pretty similar career trajectory. So these, if you look at the Piers Morgans, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, We can talk about Dave Smith in a minute because he's a little bit different. But every single one of those individuals were part of linear mainstream media or big media outlets. And they left those for whatever reason. A lot of times they were pushed out for, this form of radicalism or not or whatever. And so what's the risk in that? One thing we know is they risk obscurity. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest motivators for these people is virality. Okay. So they're always looking to, do something that makes a video go viral. They create controversy, and it's how they get their millions and millions and millions of views and viewers. So they're happy to do anything that substantiates that. I do think in some of these cases, they're probably, they definitely benefit monetarily from that approach to things, but there's a good chance that there's funding behind some of it as well. It may be that simple, but I'm not sure. In the case of Dave Smith, I would ask, Simone and Calev and anyone else out there, prior to October 7th, had you ever even heard of Dave Smith?
No.
The world had never heard of this guy, right? He's a comedian that has a podcast. I forget what it is, but I tried to find his followers and view rate prior to all of this versus afterwards, and it's pretty astronomical. So all of these guys, same thing with Piers Morgan, they went viral after this by making this a focal point. It's the same.
So it defines it. Yeah. Without it there, nobody would know them, and they'd be
And where's it going to go from here? So here's a question. They're going to try to keep this going, right? They have to, right? Because they can disappear into obscurity, and this limelight that they've been enjoying, this platform, is going to be challenged again soon when the war in Gaza ends. And what are they going to go to next? That's what we should be looking for. So I think in some ways they're setting up for the next phase of this, which is another way to be able to criticize Israel. So we're going to see a lot of that. We should be prepared for that. But yeah, that's my opinion. I think a lot of it is driven by virality. In some cases, it would seem rabid. I am going to use the word because you're not going to intimidate me from calling out Jew hatred and anti-Semitism when I see it. And in the case of Candace Owens, I think it's very, very clear. The statement that she made about her sons serving in the United States military, and she would rather see them go to jail than to fight a war on behalf of Israel. I don't know any other reason that could be. It's such an unpatriotic stance just in general, but it's directed at a specific country and a specific people. I don't know what other conclusion to draw there. So does that mean that every one of them hates every Jewish person they meet? Of course not. Of course not. Anyway, we digress. Simone, do you want to play us another clip?
For opinion, we have individuals in this country that are full citizens that are also full citizens of other countries. In your opinion, how can somebody pledge allegiance to two countries at the same time? And is that something that we should be allowing?
I think your question says it all. Obviously, that's absurd. I quote the New Testament, but I also refer to common sense when I say that no man can serve two masters. It's not possible. I only have one wife for that reason. You say to your wife, I'm going to take another wife, but I'm going to love you just as much. Nothing's going to change. My wife's going to look at me like, no, it's one wife. Because you can only really pledge your loyalty to one person or one country. That's just a fact. And there's also a sense, and this is relevant to me, and I know you're speaking about Israel, but it's not just Israel, to be honest. I think it's a huge problem. I think anybody, by the way, who serves in a foreign military should lose his citizenship immediately. There are a lot of Americans who've served in the IDF. They should lose their citizenship. There's a lot of Americans who've served in Ukraine, and they should lose their citizenship. You can't fight for another country and remain an American, period. Obviously. It's like not even, it's so funny how all of us have been cowed into being like, oh, that's hate me. No, it's not. You don't hear hate in my voice because there isn't any. It's just an obvious recognition of the truth. But there's a more insidious thing, and I say it's not just Israel. I'm not just trying to give myself cover. I'm just being honest. There are a ton of countries that offer citizenship, actually, some of which I love. I have been offered citizenship in a couple of different countries that I really like, and I thought about it.
Probably
and
Iran.
There's something about being lashed to the mast. Like everyone can see that America's in trouble. The demographic trends are really bad. And the country's decaying and cities are falling apart. So you're like, oh, wow, maybe I should flee. And then I'm like, my ancestors are from here. My parents are buried right across from my kitchen. I'm staying here. And the second you make that decision in your head, I don't care what happens to America, I will be here. It totally changes your attitude. You're like, I don't even care. It's my country. And they've been here for so long and fought in all of these wars. My ancestors, and I'm sure yours, would be totally shocked by some of the conversations. Foreign flags in the Congress? Are you joking? Get out. And so, no, once you decide you're all in on your country, it really changes the way you approach everything. And by the way, it should be the baseline requirement. You shouldn't be allowed to serve in government if you're not a U.S. citizen or you're a dual citizen. Are you joking? Of course not. And I would love to know what the justification is. And of course, there isn't one, which is why they're allowed to just write you off as some sort of like freak, some internet freak, hater, Nazi, whatever. No, I'm not. Just an American who loves my country, and I think it's fair to demand that the people running my country love it every bit as much as I do.
I think I would agree with them, and I think if you engage in a PR war on behalf of Iran, you should probably lose your American citizenship.
Right. But again, this is the crafty nature. I want to again point out the flow of these statements and monologues that Tucker's going on unchallenged. I want you to notice that he first goes to the Bible. He first goes to the Bible to demonstrate a point and takes something completely out of context. I mean, listen, if you there are so many statements I could say, well, you know, Jesus wasn't about politics at all, so we shouldn't be involved in politics at all. We shouldn't care about politics at all. But you could say, well, he said turn the other cheek, and so we should never, if we get attacked, we should, as a nation, we should just let people, like, it's an insane correlation he's drawing here, and then he gets even more insane.
Well, I mean, you can be more specific. It was as far as the context. Jesus was talking about mammon, if I'm not mistaken. You can't both be serving mammon, which is basically the god of money, and then also God. Yeah, so
there's some irony there. Greed and money. You can't serve. Yeah, what if you put those before your country, Tucker? Right, what if you put greed, money, power, etc.?
Get out.
I'm pretty sure that's what Jesus was talking about there. Yeah, you get out. You shouldn't be here. Look, there's a lot to unpack here, but the first thing is the subtle nature. Is then he actually makes an emotional plea, and it makes me wonder. Even the way this kid read or rattled off this question in slow motion, was some of this staged? Honestly, like, was that a slow pitch softball thrown at Tucker that he was prepared for in advance? It's a question. I don't know the answer, but the way he goes to Bible and then to his wife. So now he's making a plea to women. It's the reason I have one wife. Hey, you know who doesn't have one wife? A lot of people in Iran. Tuck, why don't you look up and why don't you ask the president of Iran how many underage forced marriages take place in Iran every year and how many children are born to forced marriages under the age of 15 in Iran, Tucker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, now you're concerned about your wife and about women, but you don't ask the president of Iran why women have to cover their faces constantly. And there's a morality police that goes around and beats and tortures women that want to just live a normal life. Didn't see any questions about that, Tuck. But, so here's again, this trajectory of conversation and the subtlety of it. Bible, an emotional plea, wife, and now it comes back to Israel. It's not just Israel, but that is the only country that he mentions of the 10 or more countries that you can have dual citizenship with
and
the United
Ukraine.
States. Oh yeah, he does mention Ukraine too. Hey, go figure. These are the two he mentions out of, he doesn't mention Canada, he doesn't mention Great Britain, he doesn't mention other countries that you can have dual citizenship with. And it's insanity what he's saying.
If I could just because again, this relates to myself. I'm a dual citizen, as I believe you are too, Shimon, both in the United States and Israel.
Sure am.
One thing I do know is that people like me actually still have to pay taxes in the United States. I'm an Israeli citizen. I live in Israel. I make a living in Israel, but I have to declare taxes. And if there's a certain tax category in which the taxes are somewhat lower in Israel than they are in the United States, I have to make up the difference. And not only that, if I want to get rid of my American citizenship, I have to pay an exit tax. So a certain percentage of my net worth, I need to pay the United States in order to get rid of. So the United States expresses to me that they want me to continue being in their tax system because that goes to support the budget of the federal government. And it's interesting, he talked about people who serve in the government. The one kind of subcategory that will give you an exemption from paying the exit tax if you do want to expatriate from the United States is if you serve in a foreign government. So if you or I was to serve in a position in the Israeli government and in a public decision-making position, we can then go apply to expatriate from our United States citizenship without paying the exit tax. So I'm saying that to say there's a built-in huge financial interest of the United States to keep people around the world, especially in Western countries where they're making a decent living, as citizens because they're still under the tax regime. There's a big question, I mean, even about the moral justification of a universal tax. You know, as somebody who rarely travels to the United States, most of my life is in Israel. I might get over there for 2 or 3 weeks a year or something like that. To continue to be under that tax regime is even a question. But what I'm saying is the actual picture is completely the opposite. Like, the United States wants to have people within their system. They want them in the taxes. They want them in citizenship. And if you try to get out, you have to pay an exit tax. So it's such a different picture. Again, we can get in the weeds on these things than what Tucker is trying to present, you know?
Yeah. But, and also again, and I want to talk about the two for a minute, but I also just want our viewers to constantly be remembering this and watching for this with Tucker, the trajectory of these conversations. He brings up a problem in the United States, or an emotional plea of some kind, and eventually brings the conversation around to some scrutiny, criticism, or, you know, some agenda that he has with regard specifically to Israel. And in this case, he does mention Ukraine as well. Doesn't mention any of the other countries. And I want to say, as a dual citizen and somebody who also has served in the IDF, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Calev, you and I, our parents moved to Israel when we were in our teens. We weren't forced to make a decision on whether to choose this citizenship or not. I would have chosen my American citizenship, but we had the option because it's legal to be a dual citizen, and we could talk about the reasons why. I think I'm starting to believe Tucker when he did say, I don't understand what the word ally means. I don't know what the word means. What's an ally? Well, clearly he doesn't, because there are laws that determine who's your friend and who's your enemy, and it's actually supported by the judicial system here in the United States. And, you know, it's a free country, and we have agreements with other countries that are allies that share our values that make it legal to have dual citizenship.
That's
and
right.
in fact,
we're defined as a major non-NATO ally. That's true.
That's correct. And you can serve in a foreign military that shares your value system. Tucker, you know, during the Gulf Wars, the British soldiers that served alongside the American soldiers in these different wars and have dual citizenship, and maybe we were fighting the same enemy, same as Israel in the United States, fighting the same enemy for the same value systems, and still are doing that. And you're going to tell that soldier, let's say that he was British and served in the trenches alongside American soldiers fighting the same enemy for the same cause, and he had dual citizenship, but he happened to serve in a different military fighting for the same thing. You're going to tell him that he should lose his citizenship? It makes no sense. Make it make sense. It also doesn't mean that you wouldn't put the interest of the country that you reside in first. Of course, I'm going to put America first. I'm an American citizen. I live here in this country. But when I served in the IDF, it was under the understanding that I was serving the same purpose and the same cause for the same values that American military servicemen serve for. And furthermore, when you break it down, the unit that I served in was the Civil Rescue and Save unit under Picud Oref. I forget how you say that in English.
Homeland.
Yeah, the Homeland. And you'll see them with an orange. Look for this in the news, people, with an orange beret. And this is a unit that has traveled around the world and helped other countries during natural disasters and catastrophes. I think they've had over 31 missions to foreign countries that experience earthquakes, including the earthquake that took place, in Syria and Turkey, and all of these different nations. Hey, guess what? IDF soldiers from my unit, from my base, were on American soil during Katrina, helping save lives of people here in the United States, because we're an ally and we're in it together. We're fighting for the same values and the same cause. And yes, Tucker, I know that you don't seem to understand that. That's giving you the benefit of the doubt that you actually don't really understand that. But I can tell you that it's infuriating for somebody like me, who's an American citizen and also served in the IDF, fighting the same enemies, fighting on behalf of the same things, to hear you say something so stupid. Yeah, those of you that like to do some research, just look up the Civil Rescue and Save unit from the IDF and look at the missions they've carried out around the world. Look how many lives they've saved. People that wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for the IDF just going and doing good on the planet. It's insane what he's trying to insinuate.
So I wonder what he feels about people with dual citizenships being in the United States military, like fighting in the United States military. If you are a dual citizen and you have, you're an Israeli and American, but you choose to fight for the United States, is that okay? Or do you have to leave? Like, doesn't the military do security checks?
They sure do. They sure do. I have a daughter that serves in the United States military, and she had to make a decision. She could only go so high in her security clearance. And by the way, I'm okay with that. I support that, but she's still serving in the United States Air Force as a dual citizen of the United States and Israel. And she does it on the understanding that we have a shared value system. She resides here in the United States and is serving in the United States military. She was inhibited from doing some of the things that she wanted to do because she has Israeli citizen as well as American citizenship. And, I wish that was different for the sake of my daughter, but I do understand it. And I'm okay with that. But it's legal. It's okay. And as long as it's a friend and an ally, which, again, Tucker doesn't seem to understand the difference between friends and enemies and people that share our value system and people that don't, like the regime in Iran and Qatar and these countries that have vested interests. He doesn't seem to understand that. That's, again, giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Like if the U.S. military is okay with it, then I think it shouldn't be an issue for anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to do a little Dave Smith or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me respond to a few of the things that Josh claimed. I mean, if you want to go, there was just a major report a couple weeks ago in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, where they had a bunch of IDF soldiers. They actually had one who went on record who was saying that they were ordered to shoot at crowds of people who were going into
all right, what a libel left-wing filth, by the way.
Josh, I let you talk. Let's please let Dave make his case.
Well, is the IDF soldier who went on the record also filth?
Probably.
Okay. All right, there you go. So there, see, you're whatever. That's when you'll criticize the IDF.
Okay. Dave Smith, again, is crafty speech. And I think one of the things that we should always be looking for are these systems, and they're very persuasive. They're very persuasive. The use of the language, look what he says. There was a major report. There's a major report by Haaretz newspaper in Israel. Calev, why don't you tell us a little bit about Haaretz newspaper in Israel, how it's viewed in Israel, and the fact that people like Dave Smith, I believe Piers Morgan's, I may be wrong there, but I think he's also quoted Haaretz. All of these sort of dissident voices love to quote Haaretz. So Calev, why don't you tell us a little bit about Haaretz, how it's perceived in Israel, and what exactly that publication is?
If you were to think in the United States of like the most left-leaning, progressive, wokest newspaper that is anti-government, anti-establishment, anti-right-wing, anti-President Trump, it's an extreme left-wing newspaper that is, obviously has their ultra-liberal, wokest, anti-conservative perspective on life and everything in politics. Obviously, they hate Bibi Netanyahu, who's been now the leader of the conservative bloc of Israeli politics for the last 2 decades, and I think prime minister for 17 years, etc. So anything the government does, Haaretz will be on the other side of that equation. And they'll always find a voice to support who they are and what they're doing. I have no idea who this IDF soldier is. I know that Israel would have no interest in killing Gazans that are coming to receive aid from the Gazan Humanitarian Fund and depots, right? Because that's exactly what's weakening Hamas. From my understanding, the Israeli government is actually contributing to the Gaza Humanitarian Fund to provide food and aid to Palestinians in Gaza in a way that bypasses Hamas. What interest would they have at shooting Palestinians? So to find one soldier that's going to tell a story like this, that he probably hates the government as well and hates Bibi Netanyahu and hates the war in Gaza and everything that's happening, that's the situation.
Yeah, I agree. And so when people quote Haaretz newspaper, it's important for people in the Western world to understand This is a fringe, far left-leaning publication that is looking for any voice that challenges, again, a value system and a way of living, Western civilized value system. And they have an agenda, unfortunately, like much of the media does today. Simone, I know you've looked into a little bit, like even who owns Haaretz newspaper.
Yeah, and they have a nonprofit. The family that owns it, they have a nonprofit, the Shokin family. They they're the whole, if you just look at their website, like the Shokin Foundation, you know, it says right on their front page, like we give special emphasis to closing social and economic gaps between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority in Israel. We focus on projects that alleviate the lives of immigrants and refugees in situations of economic and social injustice. So like that's what they live for. Like that's what they do.
There's things that I want viewers to think about and understand. One, just because a newspaper says something in Israel or anywhere in the world, does it make it true? Just because they found one soldier that would make a statement, does that make it true? Do you think in the United States you could find someone serving in the United States military that served in a foreign combat zone or wherever it is that would make a statement and go on record with something that has an agenda but isn't true? And do you think there would be a publication that would quote that? Of course, it happens everywhere. And you're listening to these voices like Dave Smith that bypass everything about the value system of Israel and the IDF and quote these very isolated fringe voices as if it's some kind of authority on anything. Obviously, and of course you got Josh Hammer that says, yeah, that whole publication is BS. And was that IDF soldier, also BS? And he's like, yeah, he is. Probably. Because they exist in every society. He's like, yeah, he probably was, right? So, and Dave just, see everyone, this is what you get. If somebody criticizes Israel or criticizes the IDF, this is what you get there. Hey, that's not true. I criticize the IDF all the time. I question many of the decisions they make. I criticize Bibi. I question many of the decisions that Bibi Netanyahu has made. And I want to point out, this is one of the differences between Israel and other countries in the region, like Iran, Tucker and Dave, and like Gaza, the leadership in Gaza. You can actually be a dissident voice that hates your own government and the value system that you were brought up in and still experience free speech in Israel. Guess where you wouldn't be able to do that? In any of the surrounding nations. There wouldn't even be a publication that challenged the government, the regime in Iran or any of these other places. And so I say that just to demonstrate the point of how these individuals go out of their way to bypass the enormous shared value system that Israel has with the United States and anyone that is in the persuasion of Judeo-Christian values and Western civilization and democracy. They bypass all of that to find isolated incidents that they point out and use to criticize Israel. And some of those instances are real. There are bad things that happen in every country, in every society. There are bad people in every single walk of life. There are settlers that do stupid things, and carry out acts of violence that the bulk of Israel doesn't support in any way. And we have the rule of law in Israel, and those individuals that carry out those crimes are put through the judicial system and serve time in prison. And that's the difference between Israel and all of the countries that surround them and all of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and all these organizations that celebrate these acts of violence and seek to perpetrate them, and then they reward them. And so you bypass the value system that we share in order to criticize and scrutinize. And it does merit the question that we keep coming back to. Is it anti-Semitism? There's got to be a reason for it, or is it just this desire for virality? But certainly there's something that's driving these voices.
It's really such a silly argument too. Like if you can give me 1,000 military members that say the same thing, all right, I might believe you. But like you're just going to take one person to paint the rest of them in a horrible, horrible image. It's just ridiculous. And like people fall
Dave
for
Smith
it.
also does. He does that a lot on some of his other debates. He always likes to quote Smotrich, who's the minister.
Oh, I have one. I have that.
Oh, let's do it. Let's talk. Let's get into this. Nobody talks about these things, so let's talk about them.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that any honest observer has noticed since the very beginning of this conflict is that the Israelis, including the highest levels of the Israeli government, they just speak out of both sides of their mouth the whole time. And so it's like, which argument are we even taking on? I mean, they'll sit here and say from the very beginning that the goal is just to get the hostages back and to defeat Hamas, while their finance minister is openly talking about how the goal is to cleanse the entire strip.
He's not even
and of course,
hiding
now
it.
We see,
he says
yes,
it.
yes.
He literally says it in front of the world.
Yes. And we see them now putting this into plans into action to do this. So how are we to judge this? They'll sit here and say that they've taken painstaking efforts to make sure that they limit the number of civilians that are killed, while also saying they have no idea how many civilians are being killed, and they don't count the number because that's not who they're targeting. You'll sit here and say we're only targeting Hamas, or that we're only intentionally targeting Hamas, and at the same time think about the argument they're even making, as Smotrich is out bragging about how not one grain of wheat will get into Gaza for this 3-month period that you're referring to. But they'll say, hey, look, they have stockpiles of aid that had gone in there previously. It's like, okay, Piers, so then logically, can't we deduce you're not starving Hamas? They've got plenty of food. Then who is the additional blockade supposed to impact? It's the civilian population. And so, listen, I'm sorry, this is just anybody with just common sense and a basic understanding of logic could tell you that none of these defenses make any sense. And instead, I think it's reasonable for us to say that we're going to judge the Israeli government, and I like that you were precise about that. We're talking about the government of a foreign country, not people who believe in Judaism across the world, and not even necessarily the people of that country. But when I'm judging the Israeli government, I'm sorry, I'm going to judge them based off what their actions are, and I'm going to judge them based off what their motives are when they admit the truth.
Yeah.
Let me just point out something in the beginning and end of this clip. I want every viewer to notice this. First of all, my blood boils when I watch this stuff, okay? But the first thing I want everyone to notice is in the beginning of this, Dave, you want to talk about talking out of both sides of your mouth. Dave Smith says in the beginning of this, he opens with the Israelis and even the Israeli government. And he's talking about one specific governmental official that's made some statements that he also misrepresents, okay? We can get into that. But he opens up with the Israelis and even the Israeli government talk out of both sides of their mouth. At the end of it, he says, I'm not necessarily criticizing an entire people or an entire race or even a religion. And it's like, you literally just did. You opened the whole statement with saying Israelis and the Israeli government. And if you think that that is not persuasive speech, Dave, look at what's happening around the world. Look at the effects of what you're saying. Now, okay, before I get too fired up.
Calev,
tell us about Smotrich.
Anyone with a basic understanding of the way that a parliamentary system and a coalition government works understands that in order to create that coalition government, you have to bring in various parties which represent various opinions across a spectrum of right to left. And this is a very right-wing government, but Smotrich is probably the most extreme right-wing party that in order to have enough seats representing the government, they had to bring them in. He comes into a room, the government argues over what should be, they have a debate. What should be our policy in Gaza? Is it to conquer and occupy, or is it to return the hostages and eradicate Hamas? Smotrich expresses his extreme right-wing opinion that no, we need to go in and we need to conquer the Gaza Strip. The government debates that, votes on it, votes it down, and says, no, our official policy is two things: to return the hostages and destroy Hamas. Now, did Smotrich say those things? Yes. Is that the government policy? No. And also, if you look at all the polls right now, if we were to have elections today, Smotrich would receive between 1 to 1.5% of the vote in Israel. So he might be representing the opinion of maximum 1.5% of the Israeli population that has an extreme right-wing position that thinks that we should go and conquer the Gaza Strip. He has the right to say that because he is the finance minister. But at the end of the day, it's nowhere near the policy that was voted upon and decided upon the Israeli government. And so it's so easy to take that statement out of context, to twist it, and to say, wait a second, how can you say that you're not there to actually ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip? The government's speaking out of two sides of its mouth. No, the government is not speaking out of two sides of its mouth. The government has a legitimate debate and then decides what it wants to do. And that policy is what the Israeli government is carrying out. So he says that we should look not only at the actions, but also at motive, right? But I think looking at the actions is
we're allowed to do that now.
Yeah, now we can look at motive, right? But
look at motive.
But
we can't look at yours, Dave, or yours, Tucker. We don't know why you're doing these things, saying these things.
Exactly.
But you can assess everyone else's.
But you have the right to judge the government based on the policy that they approved and whether or not they carried that out successfully. You have the right, but there is an approved policy, and there is a policy to this war, and that's what's being carried out in practice, in action. Israel is not ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip, and it's not conquering and occupying the Gaza Strip. That was voted down, and it will never happen. So that's, what's happening.
And I want to point out a few things that Dave's missing, just some real practicalities, because he always goes back to common sense. Oh, he's just the common sense thinker. You're such a common sense thinker, Dave. Hey, here's some common sense for you. The whole MAGA movement voted for somebody that said that we should take back Canada and also Iceland. Listen, politicians say stupid things. Can we agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody? Here's some common sense. And you
I think it was
don't get to
Greenland, by the
Greenland,
way.
not Greenland. It was Greenland. It was green. Well, I always get them mixed up because Greenland is ice and Iceland is green.
Iceland is green.
But anyway, Greenland. But think about this for a minute. I guess here's the question. And here's what I feel like people miss in all of this and where they get persuaded. Dave's just bypassing a million different things to go after this minutia, and it does merit the questions why. I know we're not allowed to ask his motives, but he's allowed to assess the motives and intentions of everybody else. But we can't assess his motives. But do politicians say stupid things to appeal to their base?
On the regular.
From time to time.
Everyone on every side all the time, literally. And you get to quote a very fringe, far-right politician that you bring up in every single debate that you have and use it to represent Israel.
Israelis.
And the Israelis. The Israelis and the entire Israeli government. Are you kidding me? And what you miss is Israel is a democracy where voices of all different types are represented. You don't ever talk about these things. You talk about the blockade on Gaza, the 3-month blockade, but and how nonsensical it is. But you don't talk about the fact that Israel, after experiencing the greatest atrocity since the Holocaust against its people, that you agree was carried out in the most barbaric and brutal way, Israel is held to a standard where they have to feed and take care of the enemy, who their own government uses them as human shields, doesn't protect, has stockpiles of food that the world has come together and donated out of goodwill. They stockpile it and they charge their own citizens for it if they can get it at all. And you scrutinize Israel, who's providing this aid, and saying they're not doing it good enough. And when we say enough is enough, why doesn't the government of Gaza give to their own people from what we and the world have already provided to them? You scrutinize us and say we're trying to kill civilians. And it's absolute insanity. You are the one that has no common sense, Dave. Get off your high horse and really get in touch with some form of reality. And I'm not one of these guys that says, look, I served in the IDF. It was a great military. There, just like any other military, there are things that were wonderful and ththings that I liked less. Okay, let's put it that way. You could say that of any organization, no matter what, on the face of the earth. And so I'm not one of these people that's out there saying, oh, the IDF is the most moral army. I don't know. I don't even know how to make that assessment. I'm not one of those guys. I don't feel the need to do that. But I know what the Israeli people and what the IDF have as their established value system. And they're no different than any other military on the world in the sense that things happen when you're in battle, when you're in combat. That's missed on you. And you like to quote these isolated incidents and all these different things to try to portray and depict an entire country, an entire people, and an entire army. And you have lost your moral compass. You have lost your value system in doing all of that. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm ranting today.
Yeah, you are.
Well said.
Okay, well, we'll keep bringing humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, Dave. We're going to do it through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that bypasses UNRWA, that bypasses Hamas, and brings aid directly to the people of Gaza so that it actually gets there. That's what Israel is all about. That's what Israel is doing. We can do away with the corruption and all of the immorality and, a government in Gaza that doesn't care at all about their people whatsoever. That's a registered terror organization. We're going to keep feeding the people of Gaza, Dave. We don't care what you say. And that's what's really happening on the ground. Well, folks, there you have it. A bit of an animated podcast today. Obviously, these things are very, very personal. And I don't know how they couldn't be, because, of course, as an American who has dual citizen, who has served in the IDF, and also who's just watching this public discourse and the manipulative and yet extremely persuasive nature of it, how can I not be moved by that emotionally? Of course I am. Please, please keep tracking with us. And I always say to my kids, heart wide open, eyes wide open. So we need to be leading with our hearts. We need to really be thinking about humanity. We need to really be thinking about what's going to better our society here in the United States and the world as a whole. We need to be thinking about people and putting humanity first, but we also need to have our eyes wide open. And yes, we have every right to explore the intentions and motives of voices that are in the room that are saying things that seem to be inconsistent with our value system. We have every right, and you as a viewer have every right. You can question my motives, and you can question Tucker Carlson's motives as well. So thank you so much, and have a fantastic day.